Chicago has at times been dominant in this first half. Minnesota have to only be down 4. Doesn't feel too terrible. Can they keep it a 4-goal game? De Marray versus Pollard at the buzzer. Don de Marray doing it all for Chicago. Unbelievable.
I don't know how you defend this guy. I don't know how you do it. He's composed in the backfield. He has the hucks, and then at the end of quarter, like this, reads it well, gets up, and just when it looks like it's not going to be enough, rises up a few more inches. He is sensational.
Welcome back. It's Swing Pass. I'm Adam Ruffner, joined as always by Evan Lepler. We are straddled between weeks 11 and 12. The penultimate weekend of the 2025 regular season is upon us, Evan. We've endured one of the craziest seasons. We've got one undefeated team remaining in the Chicago Union. Not going to lie, they look like they're living up to the hype. Don de Marray has been absolutely fantastic for them in recent weeks. Again, just everything about this team is kind of exceeding expectations as we flip the calendar into the mid part of July. And yet, there's still so much up in the air. I mean, we've got 8 of the 12 playoff teams confirmed. Chicago has clinched the 1 seed in the Central. But beyond that, we've got a lot of work to do to determine who and where these first-round playoff matchups are going to take place in just over 2 weeks.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to believe that a week from now we'll be entering the final weekend of the regular season, and there's a lot to be determined and so many fascinating, great games coming up this weekend. But since you just brought up Don de Marray, like, man, statistically and from the eye test perspective, he was just dominant, awesome, otherworldly, pick your adjective. And when Brian Jones said on the Friday broadcast against Minnesota that of all the players in the league, like, he thinks Don de Marray is number 1 right now and he would start a team with him, that still kind of struck me as like a whoa comment from Brian. And I'm curious to ask you, what was your reaction when you heard Brian say that Don de Marray, you know, in 7 UFA games has elevated himself above everybody else?
You know how there's that like Vince McMahon reaction meme of him sort of slowly becoming more and more excited as he like thinks about or witnesses whatever in the ring more and more. That's kind of how I felt about Brian Jones's comment. Like on Friday, as he was just taking apart the reigning champions, you know, in transition with his throws, with his footwork, I was kind of like, yeah, I could lean into this. And then the following day, when the Union go with a travel roster to Pittsburgh and face a pretty feisty Thunderbirds team, and de Marray has literally one of the best games I've ever seen in this league's history. I mean, he's just everywhere all the time. I don't think there's been someone with more stamina and foot speed combined in this league's history. And it's just like, all right, yeah, I'm on board. You know, put me at the front of this bandwagon. Like, he's acquitted himself at this point. Opponents keep throwing different defenders at him. He speeds past everyone. He does whatever he wants whenever he wants to do it. It's just too easy. And it feels like he's just beginning to possess his powers. I mean, this past weekend is where we really first started to see the attitude that comes with being one of the best players in the globe. I mean, he's dusting Justin Burnett in foot races deep and shrugging. The following day, he's just doing a little almost MJ shrug, hitting threes in the finals kind of thing, where he skies somebody and just lays the disc down next to him. I mean, it's Clark Kent figuring out that he's Superman a little bit. Again, he's only 7 games into his professional career, and we've still got all the good games remaining. I don't know. Like you say, pick a superlative, attach 5 more, and that's what you get when you talk about Don de Marray. He's just that good right now.
And Minnesota's a team where we think of defense first. And
depth.
You know,
different. kinds of defenders, right?
And Justin Burnett is the guy that you think maybe could slow him down. But like, I kind of felt sorry for Justin a little bit. Like, it was like, oh my goodness, he is just being dusted. And yeah, I mean, it was a tough day for Minnesota in a lot of ways, and Minnesota's D-line had a couple moments, but man, it was a tough day for the Wind Chill and their dreams of defending their championship, which is still very much alive. I mean, they know they're going to have to go on the road in the playoffs, but they have won in Chicago before. But it just struck me, Adam, and I may have said this on the broadcast. Like, Chicago's got a lot of really good players. Nate Goff and Paul Arders and Ben Priest is having a great season, and obviously Pavel and all he's done, and like the talented young dudes that they've got, that they've developed, that they've brought in from other teams. And then this guy from Belgium shows up and immediately looks like the best player on a really good team. And like, it didn't even look close. Like, he is number one on Chicago, and there's just no doubt about that right now.
Yeah. And one name that I would love to shout out, Brandon Van Dusen, too. He's been fantastic as kind of a fill thrower whenever they need it. I feel like he's got such a confident command of who he wants to select downfield to rip it. And he's just kind of combined with de Marray in the offense to give them that extra juice. Because I still feel like, for as dominant as the Union looked on Friday and then taking care of business against Pittsburgh on Saturday, there are weaknesses to this Union team, particularly on offense. I still feel like, there are some gelling issues, some chemistry issues. You saw it at the beginning of that game. Minnesota's defense administered some pressure before, the Union defense just took over and ran away on a break train. But this Union team has, I think, some spots of weakness. It's just so hard to see them over the shining glare of de Marray's stardom right now. Like, it's just, for any bit of sort of lacking, it's like, well, they'll make it up in transition. I mean, de Marray is doing these like Fairfax-esque blocks after turns where it's like, yeah, the defense gets 3 throws and then an Avenger level defender activates and just takes the disc back for the offense. It's wild to watch. I mean, again, Chicago seems like they're not quite fully formed yet, and they're 10-0. They're starting to dispatch everyone with, absolute authority, and it's difficult to see like who can really slow them down before maybe a potential semifinals or finals matchup.
Yeah, and Chicago's win combined with Boston's first loss, if Chicago finishes the season with 2 wins to get to 12-0, that would include a win at Breese Stevens Field. So you don't want to, put it in ink yet, but I would put it in pencil that Chicago's going to go 12-0 and potentially be the number 1 seed heading into championship weekend when they get there. That, we could see upsets. As a reminder to folks, championship weekend seeding is based upon regular season record of the 4 teams that make it there, with point diff being a difference. So if Chicago's the number 1 seed going 12-0 or even 11-1 at this point with a good point diff, they would face the team with the weakest record that makes it to the semifinals. So, that could be a 3-loss or maybe 4-loss Atlanta team. That could be a 5-loss New York team. Like, who the heck knows at this point? But that was just something that I was starting to think about as well, because Chicago definitely had the look of a team that'll be at championship weekend. And Boston, for the first time all season, experienced, adversity in the form of losing. Not to say it's the first adversity they've dealt with this year. But I was really impressed with DC in that game, Adam. I didn't see it live. I was out and about, but I watched the entire game without knowing the result later that night. And the way DC turned it around, and I mean, Boston had some uncharacteristic mistakes. Orion Cable had a drop. There was just some quirky things that happened in Frisbee. But the way DC handled the adversity of giving the lead away and then Rowan to Thomas at the end, I mean, that result changes things for me in the East. Just like seeing DC win in Boston reopens the door for everything in the East, in my opinion. Because if Boston had motored through that game and gotten to 9-0, going 6-0 at home, there's just a different feel now. They've lost that era of invincibility that they had when they were 4 games up above everyone else in the standings. Curious to get your reaction on Boston, DC, and what that means for the East going forward.
Yeah, I mean, it inverts the pyramid that we've kind of been aligning ourselves along with as we progress through this calendar, right? Like Boston is undefeated, but now we're thrown back into this rock, paper, scissors quandary of transitive properties where it's like, well, Philly beat DC and DC beat Boston and Boston beat New York and New York beat Philly. And it's like just an endless vicious cycle of trying to attach some kind of logic, but it's all to say that we're now in the thick of it. Just comes down to every game for these 4 teams in the East, right? And we get this absolute amazing 2-week finisher to the East Division slate. This Friday, Boston has to travel and face Philadelphia, and then on Saturday they have to go and face the Breeze in a rematch a week later in DC, and then on Sunday, Philadelphia has to turn around after hosting Boston on Friday and go to New York and face an Empire team that is clawing out from the grave and trying to make it, their 7th straight postseason appearance. I mean, it's just, again, as we continue to talk about this East Division throughout this 2025 season, it's chaos every week,
Yeah.
This DC team with that win, I think you're right. It acquits them of a lot of the doubts that we've seen throughout this season. And I mentioned it when I wrote the power rankings this week. They now have as impressive of quality wins as anyone in this league. They knock off Carolina at full strength back in May. They get this win at Boston against an undefeated Glory team. They've beaten New York handily. They could have beaten them twice had it maybe not been for a couple of in-game injuries to Cole Jurek and Tyler Monroe and that OT finisher. I mean, this Breeze team is legit, and I think that their defense gets healthier and better every week. Micah Wagner, that kid has been coming on real strong. Miles Grovic hasn't been able to take the field due to some of his injuries and commitments with U24 Worlds. Micah Wagner's stepped up. Alexander Falls having some good games. Musa Jah, AJ Merriman, like this defense is tightening up a bit. And yeah, that offense, Rowan's having a really good season. If this is his final run, hats off to that guy because he's really going out with a bang. And, Jock Nissen, Andrew Roy, still stable as ever behind the disc. They might make mistakes here and there, but over the course of 4 quarters, is there a backfield more reliable in high volume situations than those two? You came into the season higher than everyone, I feel like, on this DC team. And it was, I think, a little hard to see given how they fell out in the semifinals last year. But Sunday is a reminder. This team has both talent and just fighters on it that they're not going to give up anything to even the best teams in this league. And if they put it together for 4 quarters, they can beat anyone. And again, in these 1-versus-1 one-off playoff matchups, it's really hard to discount this DC team that, again, is going for its 8th or 9th straight postseason appearance. Like they're as blue-blooded as it gets in this league.
Yeah, you remind me of how high I was on DC coming into the season, and then they lose at home to Philly in that opening week, and it was just like, whoa, the entire world is upside down. Thinking about just the East Division this weekend and like the mindset of a team like Boston. Boston clobbered Philadelphia. The Phoenix were on the second day of a back-to-back when they played at Hormel and Medford. Boston's the favorite going to Philly, I think. Let's just say, though, if Philly is able to hold serve at home, then all of a sudden you have a Boston team on a 2-game losing streak, going to DC, a team that they just lost to a week earlier, and staring at the barrel of if they lose that game too, then all of a sudden Boston's in a position where they need to win at New York the following week to not lose the 1 seed if DC could go beat Philly. Like, it's not a crazy scenario to imagine that kind of precipitous fall for Boston. Now, I think Boston has the horses to go win at Philly. That would be my prediction if I'm going on the record. But I certainly would not be stunned, and it would be fascinating if Philly could show some fight, and I'm sure they will because their season's on the line too. And from the DC perspective, like, let's say Boston wins that game on Friday night in Philly. Well, then Boston's clinched the 1 seed. But they still have this rematch a day later against a team. They don't want to go into a playoff game against DC having lost to them twice in the last 3-4 weeks. So, like, everything is just so fascinatingly interwoven in the East. And then you have the New York Empire. They will be without Calvin Brown, who unfortunately tore his ACL. Really sucky news. Sorry to Calvin and the Empire. But that's an interesting ripple in New York's game against Philly. Remember, when they played at Philly earlier this year, it was another great game that went down to the wire. The Empire snuck away with a 1-goal win. But Philly's certainly going into that game with confidence, feeling like they can compete. And, I mean, going into this weekend, Adam, if Philly goes 0-2, they're in danger of being eliminated. And they know that. If Philly goes 2-0, then there's a chance New York gets eliminated. So, like, and there's also a chance that we go into the final week of the season and nothing is determined. So there are some clinching scenarios, but we got this Friday, Saturday, Sunday sequence. This is like the most interesting 3 days we've ever had in a division at this point in the season, with just kind of that one game per day, super meaningful, consequential, and like depending on what happens will ripple through the entire rest of the season and beyond.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, if Philly is going to address this Boston problem on Friday, they've got to watch the tape from how DC has handled the Glory offense in their 2 games so far this season. I mean, it's kind of incredible given that Boston is usually a top 10, almost top 5 in terms of offensive success rate. And yet in the 2 games against the Breeze this year, 15 of 40 on offensive possessions. That's under 40% conversion rate. I mean, again, this Breeze defense has sort of figured out how to really slow down a Boston attack that does struggle to it's difficult, right? Like, Glory love their one-on-one matchups. They have so much talent and trust in what they can do in them. And yet, as we saw on Sunday, there's an arrhythmia. There's a hesitation somewhere, right? Like, they struggle to score. It's no secret. They're in the bottom half of the league in scoring. I mean, it's kind of crazy given that they have an offense that features Orion Cable, Toba DeCrana, Calvin Stoughton, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, that's a team that just theoretically on paper, in my mind, puts up 22 a game. And yet, against DC and against some of these other teams in the East, Boston becomes so focused on possession, so focused on not giving the disc away, that I think they become a little bit limited in their attack. And I do feel like, given Philadelphia's great coaching this season and just their general discipline on the defensive side of the disc, they could develop coverages similar to what DC showed, especially given how Paul Owens and Nate Little have played for the Phoenix this year. That defense is playing up. They've got some athletes that can cover in space, and I think that they can kind of put a little bit of a cap over some of the 1-versus-1 big boy ultimate that the Glory like to play. But again, on Sunday, Boston, they attempted 8 hucks. They completed 4 of them. And beyond that, they just looked kind of toothless in a lot of their attack.
Yeah, no, you're not wrong. I'm really curious which Philly is going to show up for this game. Because early in the year, they had such an air of confidence. The way they played in the red zone, the way they saw angles and made things happen and kept possessions alive against tough pressure from the Breeze and the Empire and even the Toronto Rush early in the season. But Philly has just had a different feel to them, since they went on the road and got walloped at Montreal and Boston. And they've had some availability issues as well. But they got both Grossberg brothers back. Scott Heyman, Sean Mott in the lineup, Paul Owens, Nate Little, leading the D-line. Like, they've got their horses, and the question is, will their horses be good enough against this Boston team? And on Saturday, the DC Breeze have 3 really, really good players who are currently listed as questionable. And I do not have an injury update as to whether they're going to play. But my thoughts about the Breeze will vary greatly depending on whether Christian Boxley, Miles Grovick, and Gus Norbaum are go or no-go for that game. Because those are 3 transformative guys, particularly Boxley on O and Grovick on D. I mean, Gus is a DC Breeze possession stapler on offense. But, Boxley and Grovick are 2 of the best in the league at what they do. So to match up with all...
Add to it Cole Jurek. He moved from questionable to just dressed. And he's one of the top receivers and producers in the league this year.
He's had some nagging stuff throughout the season. So, it's funny. Like, my guess is if he was capable of playing, he'd be playing, because this, in many ways, could be the game that gets Boston or gets the DC Breeze into the playoffs or not. Like, it's not a championship game, but if they lose this game at home, you could envision them missing the playoff, depending on how things shake out elsewhere. But yeah, I mean, I'm really curious to see how Boston responds to their first loss. They lose by 1. They were outplayed in the second half, and yet they rallied late. I mean, they were down 15-11 and came out and, showed some guts in the fourth quarter to get back in that game. I was really impressed with Emmett Young defensively. It's like, who's this guy? And he gets 2 big blocks late, including the one on Jacques Nissen that created the tying score late in that game. And, just they're having different young guys step up. But it's a mentality thing, like, to go on the road. And we saw that from Boston. They played well up in Canada. Can they do it again at Philly and DC, which is an even tougher journey?
Well, and I think you kind of almost hit on it a moment ago. You say a different person steps up every week. And while that is encouraging in some sense, on the flip side of that, you've kind of got this Boston team that shifts its identity a bit each and every week, depending on who's available in the lineup. And again, while they're all talented, I do think it speaks to some of the skepticisms we're starting to develop as we head towards the postseason. I mean, you look again at that DC team last week when they needed to gut it out in the clutch. Who's doing it? The backbone of their roster: Thomas Edmonds, Rowan McDonald, guys that have been there for years. On the flip side for Boston, not to say that their stars didn't perform well, but it just feels like a little bit like they don't know who to get the ball to in clutch time. Right? Who is going to be the go-to? Obviously, Toba DeCrana had another fantastic performance, but is he necessarily going to be the absolute closer on those final possessions? I think Boston is still kind of wondering that themselves, And again, on the flip side, you have this DC team who, even without Boxley and Jurek, their ostensible number 1, number 2 receivers, you still kind of know where the disc is going when you look at this lineup. They still got Tyler Monroe, Thomas Edmonds, Rowan McDonald. They'll figure it out, if they need to. And again, like, this Boston team, for all their talent, for just being undefeated, for having their worst game of the year and losing by a single goal and almost having a fourth quarter rally, we don't need to heap on too much skepticism. But, where is the heart of this team when it matters most? I think that's the thing that they're going to have to prove going into the playoffs.
Yeah, there's no doubt. Like, and they've had some close calls that went their way earlier this year too. So, it goes both ways. The Glory are still without Simon Carapella this weekend. That's big for the O-line. He's a glue guy. And no Tyler Chan for the D-line is a big deal. I mean, along with Tanner Johnson-Go, Tyler is as dynamic as anybody on that D-line, and a force after a turnover, and just relentless speed, and so much big game experience. So Wyatt Kellman, who's been slotted in on the O-line and played pretty well, he's also out this weekend. It's a Boston team. I think they trust Toba DeCrana at crunch time, but it's who's the other guy downfield. Like, is it Cable? Is it Stoughton? Right. It's not Kellman this week because he's out. So, and they had such success on offense without Babbitt in Canada that were like, all right, they'll be okay. But, there's a reason Jeff Babbitt's the two-time MVP playing primarily on offense. And when things got a little tricky last week, they missed his stabilizing presence at times out there too. So, yeah, I'm really curious to see how Boston fares. And obviously, Philly very much has their season on the line. I mean, if they lose at home, then Boston clinches the 1 seed. Maybe Boston takes a little foot off the gas Saturday. If DC wins over Boston on Saturday after Philly had lost the day before, then the Phoenix are on the verge of elimination if they lose at New York on Sunday. So, everybody could be alive, but things could also go downhill really quick for a team like the Phoenix. But that's how it's been in the
standings. We talked about it before. It was flipping back and forth between who would go from second place to fourth week to week over the past 2 to 3 weeks, practically the whole month.
Yeah, I mean, even at the bottom of the standings, who had Montreal losing at home to Toronto and starting off miserably the way they did? That game doesn't impact the playoff race, but I know it meant a lot to those guys. And, Toronto is now 2-0 against Montreal this year. The Royale have wins against DC. They have wins against New York. They took Boston to double overtime, and yet they're 3-8 at the bottom of the standings in, arguably the craziest division in the history of the league, this side of the 2021 Atlantic.
Let's skip coasts and actually kind of the reverse of some of these teams that are maybe trending downward. How about Salt Lake riding this 9-game winning streak? We love to draw NBA comparisons. It is kind of a shooting and rhythm league, and we were just talking a moment ago about some of Boston's offensive struggles. I think kind of the counterpart to that is how Salt Lake is playing right now. I mean, they absolutely dusted the Summit in Colorado on Friday. The Shred look like the best conditioned team in the league. Nate DeMorgan and some of the college pickups that they added just fit in right away and give them another couple of firecrackers to play with. I mean, it's kind of overwhelming to watch this Shred team just go for 4 quarters. I mean, Chad Jorgensen is playing at an MVP level, and then everything just kind of flows from around that. Jordan Kerr is back in the groove this year. He just looks fantastic. Matt Rusnagel, you picked him, I think, for most improved this year. I had him as one of my finalists, but man, watching him week to week, he's just so impressive. And it's one of those things you're going to get snogged. It feels like such a power charge up for this team whenever he's catching goals, and he's been doing it more and more as the season progresses. I mean, McKay Orgeson, Jacob Miller, Braden Eberhardt, they're all playing fantastically and just don't give the disc away. Jace Dunabile, kind of flipping back and forth depending on where the coaching staff wants to use him, looking absolutely resurgent after I feel like a little bit of a down 2024 season. This team is just firing on all cylinders. You barely even notice Will Selfridge hasn't been active recently. He was one of their main offensive cogs, and I think one of the most exciting parts of them. He's been out with a nagging injury, and it's just the machine trudges forward, man. This Shred team, they feel like one of the best teams in the league this year, despite being one of the youngest.
And the contrast, Adam, to what happened to Salt Lake's offense down the stretch last year, where the pieces just didn't fit right. And they had a lot of talent, but things were clunky. And for them to go from that team that was trending downward at the end of last season to this buzzsaw unit that we saw in Golden, Colorado this past Friday, I talked to Summit coach Tim Kafalis earlier today, and I think the one name you didn't mention, and this is just an oversight on your part, was the first name that TK mentioned he's like, McKay Jorgensen is a terror. He's just an automatic reset. He keeps the disc moving. Oh, yeah. The Summit thought their defenders did a pretty good job on McKay, and he still just picked him apart. It's a really well thought out unit right now, and for them to do what they did without Selfridge was pretty incredible. But I mean, you're talking about Rustnagel. Like Bryce Merrill told me yesterday, he's like, I wish I had 35 Matt Rustnagels. Like he's a former Marine. He just, give me a role, give me a job. I'll do it
Former
to the best of my
Nashville Night
ability.
Watch role player.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And yeah, um, I mean, Chad Jorgensen is like the alpha on that unit, and for him to kind of morph into O-line star after being the dynamic D-liner is impressive because I think he's been even more efficient than they expected him to be. For Jace Dunabile to kind of be that back and forth guy, like he's gone back to D a bunch of times when Selfridge is there, but then Selfridge is out, so they bring Jace back and he's virtually unstoppable. And, Jordan Kerr, like he's still a really freaking good player. And he's maybe lost a little bit of the authority and it's made them better. And like him taking that complimentary role has made them more dangerous. And yeah, they're really clicking right now. I know from talking to TK that the Summit are a team that pride themselves on their defense since the very beginning. TK is a defensive guy, and they were not very pleased with their defensive performance. They have been watching the film, breaking it down. They're going to have a different energy, a different game plan, a different motor this week. The question is, will that matter? Or will Salt Lake be able to handle whatever Colorado throws at them? I think like it's reasonable to expect that Salt Lake is not going to be as crisp and come down with every 50-50 and have 6 guys out of 7 on the O-line that have 0 turnovers for the second straight week. Like that, just the law of averages and the nature of 175 grams of plastic changes from week to week and things happen. But you're right. I mean, what Salt Lake has done and how they have, I mean, I don't want to even say how they've evolved, but like remember the first game of the year they had 9 turnovers in Atlanta and the offense was phenomenal. But just the way they cut, the way they move together, the way they are capable of the big plays, but can also just pick you apart slowly. It's they're playing as well as anybody in the league right now. I think my question, and honestly, I think Bryce Merrill is wondering too, and I'll finish this here. Like Bryce is, I think, kind of curious. Like, can we keep this up? Like, because I think he didn't expect them to be this good. I think that's fair to say. So will they have some sort of regression, or can they continue to keep this high level into August when it counts the most?
I think that's exactly the beauty of their youth, right? Like you get to be this hubristic. You get to realize your powers in real time and not have second thoughts about it. That's what's so scary about, even the insertion of DeMorgan into their D-line. They get a top college prospect who just comes in and throws haymakers from deep, has almost like a Bob Will Byers haircut, and he's swagger out the window. I mean, he did a stare down spike in this game. He's 140 pounds soaking wet. And he's got all the confidence in the world because of what this team imbues into every single player on both lines. You talk about 1 through 7 chemistry, that's what the Shred have. And you talk about the differences from last year and kind of how they were maybe more a little bit Kerr-centric. Yeah, this year they can just attack from any angle. And I feel like that ability has started to really catch teams off guard because you try to game plan for like, all right, we're going to slow down Chad and Jordan. Well, you forgot about Snog and McKay, who are just going to pick you apart in all the red zone looks that they have. Or Eberhard, who is streaking deep against Oakland for a few scores a couple weeks prior at home. They're different this year because while the system exists for the framework, they're a rhythm team. Again, they're a shooting team. They kind of get a feel a quarter or two into the game and they go, all right, that's our hot hand tonight. We're going to feed them. They're not just going to look for Kerr on the rail, getting it to Dunabile streaking in the corner. Maybe this night it's Rustnagel. Maybe the next night it's Dunabile. Maybe the next night it's Chad. They just kind of take their turns in such a way where it's like, yep, that's exactly who they should be going to this week. Yeah, they're so impressive right now. And again, I kind of have the same read on them as Bryce Merrill. It's like, all right, are they going to turn back into a pumpkin, or is this the shred in 2025? You know, are they just this kind of runaway freight train of energy?
By the way, you said De Morgan 140 pounds soaking wet. He listed himself at 155, so just want to make sure we're
That is
factually accurate
wet.
there.
That's the
But
soaking wet weight.
yeah, soaking wet 155. He just turned 19 in June, by the way, just over a month ago.
He's been fantastic for them. I mean, again, the fact that they just got him around June is such a boon to this team.
Yeah, and it's it's an interesting guy to mix in late in the season, like because he does quirky things with throws with both hands, and he throws lefty backhand hucks and righty hammers to the opposite side of the field, and like mixing him and all of his tools into the shred system is, I don't want to say a square peg into a round hole, because obviously it fits better than that, but like there's a process to it, and I think they the shred like want him to play within their system, but they also want him to be himself and do what he can do. So it's like trying to find the right balance there. That is really interesting. I'm excited to see him in person with a shred for the first time tomorrow night in Friday Night Frisbee. And yeah, I mean, let's talk about Colorado for a second, right? Like this is a team that they had gone undefeated against the West Division before this past Friday, excuse me. Their only two losses were in Texas. They still are a factor in the West playoffs, as is the Spiders. But Colorado needs to show us something this weekend. And they've got a lot of really competitive guys, from the young dudes like, Tobias Brooks and Zeke Thorson and Anoman Fink that have been grinding since the college season, January, February, to the old guard of this team, Jay Frood, Matty Jackson, Seth Ferris, like the guys that have been on this squad since the beginning, Kai Marshall. I don't know if I'm just naming old Texas guys, but like there's a lot of heart on this Summit squad. And, Tim Kafalas has dwelled upon the team's inconsistency. Like in moments, they look great. They can play great quarters, great halves. Can they put all the pieces together and play a great game on the road? Because while, yes, they did win at Salt Lake last year, if you go back and look at that game, that was a weird game. Salt Lake, I think, was up by 4 or 5 in the fourth quarter. And, I mean, that was kind of, in some ways, that was like the beginning of the end of the shred, and just like showing how kind of careless they could be on offense and give up big runs. We haven't seen them give up a run like that all season, except for the Seattle game in the first half. And look, I was out there for that Seattle game, and the Cascades, who've long been eliminated from the playoff, look like the better team. So I do think Colorado could go in there and throw some punches. And I'm curious if they can be consistent and just like have the right balance of intensity and mindset to give Salt Lake a true challenge. Because like this is not a playoff game, obviously, but I'm going to have zero faith in Colorado heading into the playoffs, especially if they have to go to Salt Lake, which they likely would, even if they can, if they get by the Spiders. I'm not going to have any faith in them if they lose by 6 at home and then lose by 8 on the road a week later. Like, things happen. We've seen. I go back to 2018, and New York had never beaten Toronto, and then all of a sudden they get that win, which at the time was as stunning as any result in the history of the league, even though you look back and that New York team had Ben Yott and Bo Kittredge and the Dross and like a talented group, but you just never seen it before. So it's kind of similar with Boston, DC this weekend. Like if Boston loses at DC and looks bad doing it, I might, regardless of where the East Final is played, kind of lean DC's way and go back to my preseason perspective that DC is the team to beat in the East. So Yeah, we're going to learn a lot this weekend. It's going to be really interesting. What do you? I've been rambling. What do you think about the summit? What did you see last week, and what will tomorrow night tell you about Colorado?
I think the biggest question I have just comes down to, okay, Colorado needs to make adjustments from, last Friday, but the biggest issue is just the speed that this shred team brings. What is Colorado going to do about that? They had Noah Kuhlman on defense last week, but beyond that, it kind of feels like the shred wins 6 out of the 7 other matchups as far as just beating a defender to a spot. So are we going to see maybe a non-Ming Fink, a Zeke Thorson switching over for some defensive points? Because the problem last week just felt like the levee broke with this summit coverage, where it wasn't just, okay, Chad Jorgensen has a good game. It was 6 out of the 7 offensive starters didn't have a turnover. So how are you going to stop this shred team from just getting into rhythm as they've seemingly done every single game, including their opening loss in Atlanta? I mean, again, we came away from that game saying this Atlanta team that has championship caliber defense can't keep up with this shred attack. And it's just kind of been the similar story all season. Again, the shred lead the league in scoring. What are the Summit specifically going to do to slow that down? It felt like last week, they tried some of the roller pulls and double team traps on the sidelines, and the shred would just, one throw out of it, reverse the fields, and be off to the races. And I wonder what the adjustments are for Colorado going into this matchup. Is it going to be some personnel switches? Is it going to be a little bit more of some kind of zone look? I mean, it's not something that the West teams do often, Evan, is employ any kind of zone defense outside of those, trap double teams to start possessions. With the Jorgensens playing at the level that they are, with the, again, just across the board speed that they have, how do you stay in front of this shred team right now?
It's the $1 million question, because Colorado needs to create more chances. They only had 3 break chances and only converted one of them across 4 quarters on Friday night, and that certainly will not be good enough. Really excited about this game. It's hard to believe that Summit and Shred have played multiple times every year since they entered the league in 2022, and they've always been great games. And somehow, like the quirk of the schedule, anytime there's a good Salt Lake, Colorado game, there's like another great game going on that night. And I personally have never seen a Colorado Salt Lake game in person. Never gotten to call one. So, I'm excited to experience these two teams together for the first time, because I haven't had a chance to do that before. And, over the course of my years in the league, it's been over a decade now, there's, been a lot of fun matchups, and like anytime you see a matchup for the first time, there's an intrigue and a cool feel to it. I had a trivia question for you, Adam, that I wanted to throw at you, and this is out of left field, and I have not prepped him for this, but you follow the league as closely as anybody, so I'm guessing you will know the answer. Maybe give folks at home a chance to think about it. There are 2 franchises in the UFA that have made the playoffs in every year of their existence. Name the 2 teams.
Flyers and the Shred.
You got it. And well done. I'm not surprised that you got it, but here's the point of the question. If Carolina loses on Saturday against Atlanta, they are off that list. It is a must-win game for the Carolina Flyers to keep the decade-long postseason streak alive. And if they can't beat Atlanta at home, then Salt Lake stands alone and going 4 for 4. And obviously the Flyers have been around since 2015, the Shred just since 2022. But I thought that was an interesting way to frame the importance historically of the South rivalry that we're going to see in Carolina on Saturday night, because it's a huge game for both teams. It's Atlanta's chance to vanquish their rivals. And Carolina, in a lot of ways, has history on its side. The way they've played against the hustle at home and their streak of playoffs. Like, you think about it, all the great franchises we have in the league, every team has missed the playoffs once. New York has missed the playoffs before. DC, Minnesota, Chicago, like all of these elite teams have had their ebbs and flows, and that's great. That's part of sports. But the Flyers are the one team that have been in the dance every year, and that could change Saturday night. Do you expect it to?
Man, I mean, I'll tell you one thing. This is just a playoff game. I mean, we can say that it takes place during the regular season calendar, but this, for all intents and purposes, is an elimination game that will not only affect, the South Division. This game has consequences that will ripple forward for the rest of the season. Because, again, as we've been talking about for the past few weeks, as the Flyers have been on this 5-game winning streak, these are one of the teams that you do not want to get hot. This is a team that was in the finals last year, had a very good shot at winning the title against Minnesota, would have been their second in 4 seasons, as many as the Empire. We talk about again and again the sort of Spursian quality of this Carolina franchise to your trivia questions point of they make it to the playoffs every damn season. And so this Saturday game is of all importance, not only to the Flyers, but to Atlanta as well, because for as good as this hustle team is, Atlanta continues to lose all of the more crucial matchups to their rivals from Carolina. And if they can put a big old wooden stake through the heart of this Flyers team in week 12 and just dispatch them before some other kind of magic afflicts this Atlanta franchise in the postseason, I mean, it's a necessary must win for Atlanta as well. They cannot allow this Flyers team to continue to exist in the playoffs this year. They're too damn good. Laviolette and Fairfax are too damn talented. I mean, the Flyers are activating Elijah Long for the first time. He was basically their center handler for the last few years. He hasn't played yet in 2025. He's going to be playing for Carolina, which means that if they make it into the postseason, they're going to be adding one of the best pivot handlers, that Andrew Roy, McKay Jorgensen level kind of player, for their playoff push. So, again, Hustle have to win this. I know we say for the logistics of the playoffs that Carolina must win it to stay alive. I feel like Atlanta has an equal amount of pressure on them because they can't allow this Carolina team to continue to exist. They're trouble, man.
They can't allow them to continue to exist, he says. I understand what you're saying. Christian Bielis also making his season debut. And I'm glad you mentioned Elijah Long. He was not listed as active earlier this week, but you're right. He is in there as
John
of now.
Growlers is active. He hasn't been active much in 2025. One of the best rookies last year, defensive stud in the playoff for them. You look at the active roster for this Carolina team this weekend, and it's like, oh yeah, that's the championship Flyers team we're used to. Don't let them off of the mat. And on the flip side, we've got an Atlanta team without Lucas McClamrock.
I was just going to say that.
Bullet with a star next to it, particularly with Long being activated for the Flyers. You figure like that'd be a natural point for McClamrock to address. And yet, man, Atlanta's going to have to really bring it this weekend on the road in Carolina. They don't fare well in that venue either, traditionally. But
What did you think of the graphic that Atlanta's social media team posted about how they're undefeated at home in the regular season the last 3 years?
I mean, hang the banner, right? It's kind of one of those honors where it's like, yeah, you can make stats do a lot of interesting things. How many of those, I would ask, in response, how many of those wins would they trade for the 2 that they're lacking?
Yeah. Hey, by the way, I just noticed Sean Cannell active for the Hustle for the first time since he hurt his shoulder in Minnesota.
That's great, because I do feel like those couple of weeks when they were out without Cannell and Christian Olsen, you really saw this Atlanta attack slow down a little bit. I mean, those guys have been such important glue pieces and hybrid fillers kind of whenever they need them. I feel like they've been so supplemental to the successes of the downfield players like Cameron Brock, Alec Wilson-Holiday, Jeremy Langdon. And without them, you see that mid-range game disappear for Atlanta. And all of a sudden it's kind of like, okay, you got Draco in the backfield and these receivers downfield and Holzmeyer and everyone else, but what's really connecting them? Cannell being active, fantastic. I mean, we've got so many good games going into week 12. Again, this is a playoff game in my mind.
Yeah.
Like, both teams need to win this.
Where do you lean? Where do you lean, Carolina, Atlanta on Saturday night?
I don't know.
It's so tough.
I think it's one of those games where it comes down to which team's best players play better. You know, is it Halsmeyer and Taylor out dueling Fairfax and Laviolette essentially, and which defenses can get a few more stops? I mean, I think the last couple of regular seasons we've seen the hustle have that advantage. But this Flyers team with Wellers and Bielis active all of a sudden, I mean, they're going to have some dudes flying around out there. Matt Tucker's been really nice again this year. It's such a toss-up when these two teams go head-to-head in my mind. I mean, one of the best rivalries in the UFA. I feel like it gets watered down because we see it 4 to 5 times every single year. But these are such good teams that match up so well with each other. There really isn't, I feel like, a strategic advantage to either team. It's just kind of who's feeling it that week. And again, this week with Carolina, with their fully formed roster, I don't know. I'm beating around the bush. Also, I just noticed that Fairfax is out for this weekend. That's a recent shift. So
you're right.
Fairfax for Saturday. I mean, on that alone, I would almost give just a toss-up advantage to Atlanta, because that eliminates one of Carolina's most important buzzer beater weapons, matching up with Halsmeyer and some of those jump balls. That's huge. All right, slight edge Atlanta, but
we've got breaking news here, folks. Adam has gone with the hustle.
Full hedge.
Yeah, to be honest, I missed that as well about Fairfax being out, and I was leaning Atlanta's way and feeling really ready to be like an idiot when Carolina won by 5. Maybe I still will feel like an idiot, but I just think I've talked before, like the look and the feel and the vibe of this hustle team. There's a hunger that, like, there's no stat that can measure it. And we see this in sports all the time. Just like teams that haven't gotten there versus teams that have. And yes, there's like a confidence thing with like, oh yeah, we've been there, we know we can do it. But I think an even more powerful force is the hunger of a team that knows that they're good enough, but still has had bad luck, various quirky things, best players dropping the disc in crazy moments. And while those things still lurk in the back of my mind for Atlanta, I do think this is going to be their time in the South Division. Now, there's a lot of ultimate left. Of course, this is the Hustle's last game. Carolina has to go and play 2 in Texas next week. Even if the Flyers win this game, Carolina still hasn't clinched anything because they could still lose at Austin or at Houston next weekend and then be on the outside looking in. The Flyers need to run the table to make the playoffs. And, yeah, it's going to be like the dynamic with assuming Austin beats LA, which we shouldn't assume because Austin had a lot of trouble with LA out west earlier this year. But if we grant the premise that Austin's going to beat LA in Texas on Saturday, then a Carolina win clinches the top seed for Austin even before their game against Carolina. And if Atlanta wins, then Carolina's eliminated, and it's a Flyers team that is only playing for pride at Austin next Friday night. So that's why I lean Austin's way in terms of getting the 1 seed. Now, it would be a heck of a story if the Aviators could go to Texas and knock them off. And look, that's a prideful Aviators team with a bunch of veterans, and Jonathan Lyle is playing at all league level right now in his first year.
Mind, man.
Yeah, he's really good. He's really good. So yeah, we haven't even mentioned that game, and that game is not on the list of can't miss games because there are just too many this week. Like that graphic of 5 can't miss games was just like, man, what a freaking slate we've got. But the last time LA and Austin played, it was a banger. and Kyle Henke to Jackson Potts at the buzzer. Basically won it for the Soul. We'd be remiss if we didn't mention Mark Henke's name during the pod with what he's done the past 2 weeks. I mean, did you see this coming from little Stinky Henke?
Yeah, because Kyle's been kind of, forecasting this for a few years. He's said that Mark is probably a little bit better than him. It's just going to take a second for him to catch up. And Lil Stinker, as the whole broadcasts have dubbed him, is starting to, maybe in some ways leapfrog his brother. I mean, he's smooth with it, man. And there's an expansiveness to Mark's game that I think is much more developed at his age than where Kyle was at a similar age. Again, Kyle came, into superstar mode basically as he joined the professional scene. He was making highlights and some of the most famous plays right out the gate. And so I feel like he's settled in to his position a lot more, but Mark's got a lot to prove, and I think he's really showcasing that lately. Like, there's just an explosiveness to his game that is difficult to quantify. And again, he's been the leader the past couple weeks as Jackson Potts has been in and out of the lineup. And yeah, he's been playing as well as anyone as July has kicked off here in the UFA. I just want to go back a half second and talk about Atlanta, Carolina, one more little point, and that's that we get to see a head-to-head of what's been the two best throwers so far this season, and Alan Laviolette for Carolina and Austin Taylor for Atlanta. I mean, we talk about how important the QB1 position is in this league, and these two guys have been at the head of that list all season long. And it's just going to be so cool to see what is essentially like, a Burrow versus Allen sort of matchup of just two guys who can absolutely fling it this year and have virtually been in the zone every single game. I mean, I can't really think of a down performance for Draco, and Laviolette the past month has just been, we've talked about the superlatives plenty of times in this podcast. He's kind of been the best player alongside of Don de Marray.
Yeah. I was just thinking as you're talking, like I was going to ask you this question, but I may just answer it myself. My 5 top MVP candidates right now, and man, I just realized I'm going to forget someone who deserves to be on the list too. But I think Laviolette and Taylor are on there. I think Toba DeCrana and Don de Marray are on that list. And this is not in any particular order. In my mind, I had Chad Jorgensen. And then I just saw Walker Frankenberg's name, and I'm like,
Oakland
expletive.
So with that, yeah.
Because Frankenberg deserves to be in that top 5 too. So I've just talked myself into a pretzel because I don't know who, if we're creating a top 5, I don't know who I leave out on that list.
Yeah, I mean, I think your original top 5 with the inclusion of Chad Jorgensen is where I'm at right now. Again, we've still got so much ultimate left to play. So we do account for the playoffs when we do our end of season awards. So there's still a lot of ultimate left. Yeah, I mean, I feel like I would concur with that top 5. I feel like I would go back to BJ saying that de Marray is kind of pulling away, and after this past weekend, he might have leapfrogged Draco and Laviolette into the number 1 position in my mind because there's just so little he can't do at an excellent level.
I expect de Marray to be great in the playoffs and in the interdivisional games at championship weekend, assuming they get there. But I do think it's worth mentioning he has not played an interdivisional opponent yet. He was unavailable for their Atlanta game. So, he's played Minnesota twice. He's played Madison once. He's played Pittsburgh twice. He's played Detroit and Indy. It'll be different if he's going up against Boston or Salt Lake or Atlanta or DC. Like, I expect him to be great, but I think that will be a big game for de Marray's MVP case because, while the stats are undeniably impressive, it's still against the Pittsburgh team and an Indy team that have struggled to stop anybody this year in many of this. So I don't mean that to take away from de Marray at all. I just say going forward, he will have more high-profile showcases to show his stuff. But And I just think back to the buzzer beater at the end of the first half as we kind of return to
That
where
was
we started.
silly. That was silly.
Like, and look, Minnesota, as poorly as they had played, were only down 4. And they were going to get the disc to start the third. And like, that was a two roads diverge moment, and De Marray just ripped out their soul by skying. I think it was Soufflo and maybe DeClerc.
It was
Apologies to
Pollard
Dylan.
who got caught up as
Yeah,
a little bit of a
Pollard and
casual
Soufflo.
bystander. Yeah.
Two guys right there, and Don just read it perfectly.
It's
And
weird to watch in slow motion on the replay because de Marray almost appears to be moving in bullet time. Sulflo, if you're watching it, almost looks like he gets a hand on it, and then his hand just kind of stops as it makes contact with the disc, and instead de Marray just sort of plucks it and continues to spin as he comes down with that buzzer beater. But yeah, I mean, to your point, he's just a finisher right now. And the last thing this Chicago team needed was a tip to their spear. You know, I think that was maybe going to be my question as the season evolved was sure they have all this talent, but similar to Boston, who's going to step up in crunch time? There's no question about that right now with the Union. It's Don. You know,
yeah,
it's just going to be him. I don't think I've ever seen someone too be on one end of the field making one play and then leading the attack on the other end a few throws later as often as he does, where it's just, you know, he's getting the block out in transition and then he's scoring the go away goal 3 throws later. There's not other players doing that, you know?
yeah. I mean, to what Ben Priest told me, and I quoted Ben in the toss, like Don is just an absolutely complete player, elite at everything, and like the one thing you might not have been really sure about was, all right, he's got all these skills. How will that translate into the UFA? Refereed ultimate, different disc, different field. Um, I think he's adapting okay. I think
It took
he
him
he might have a chance to be a good player.
It took him about a quarter to figure out double teams, I think. Maybe a couple of possessions. I don't know. I mean, it was apparent from the get go.
Yeah. And the last thing Ben said, Don won't stop unless we force him to sit. That was a powerful, powerful way of putting it.
That's how he
Uh,
plays. It's like he needs to win every single cut. I mean, that's the thing too. It's not just the skills; it's the mental state that he's in too. Where there's a competitive edge there that, frankly, you know, I think to Brian Jones's point, I don't really know that anyone's showing that right now. Like he just wants every single possession, every single play, every single quarter.
yeah, with all due respect to Tom Blasman and Leo Gordon and Adam Reese and Jonathan Lyle, is the Rookie of the Year race a done deal right now? I mean, can anybody challenge De Marais? Like, I think he has some other fellow contenders in the MVP conversation, and there are a
Yeah,
lot of good rookies. First team all rookie is going to be tough, but I think De Marais. I mean, I can't imagine him at this point not winning that award, barring some sort of crazy Gordon or Reese finish with the Spiders, which is not out of the question, but just watching Don in person last week, he was at a different speed than Minnesota. Minnesota's got a good defense.
they have a really good defense. I thought Burnett played okay. You know, Sulflo did a pretty good job on him at times. At times, though, that's the thing. You
Yeah.
need to like change out defenders almost like worn down tires when it comes to de Marais because he's just cutting all the time. Again, it's only his teammates who can really tell him to stop or go sit down for a minute. You put him out in the field, he's just the road runner.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I love seeing the swagger come out a little bit. I mean, he hit Justin Burnett with a shrug running into deep space. Who does that? That's Justin's move.
What was the clip? Did you post the clip from the Pittsburgh game where he kind of held the disc out, like offering it to the defender as like a helpless,
And then
Oliver
wiped his
looking
nose a
for
little
more?
bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, nonchalant. Yeah. Yeah. Again, it's just
You, you,
it's
you
coming
picked the
out.
right emojis on Instagram for that.
I was
Just like
I
the
was
ice
talking
cold
with
face.
I was talking with Daniel Cohen, who was shooting the game from the sideline against Minnesota, and he was saying that Don was just talking all 4 quarters. He was just out there jawing. And I love when guys get into that state. That's just fun. It's fun when someone hits that flow state, and it feels like that's what he's in right now.
So let me mention this as we wrap up. Something to watch tomorrow. Tobias Brooks and Tony Moonga had a lot of chirping back and forth this past weekend in Colorado.
Moonga brings that out in many, many West Division opponents.
But like Toby brings the swagger, confident kid, obviously insanely talented too. If he had played the whole season, maybe he'd be in that MVP conversation, realistically.
Oh, yeah.
I think we're going to see a different type of fireworks tomorrow night in Salt Lake City. I expect there to be something extracurricular that impacts this game. I don't know what it's going to be, obviously, but like those are two teams that both can talk. I mean, Salt Lake has a bunch of just really polite Mormons as well, but there's a lot of attitude on both those teams. And when you play the same team 2 weeks in a row with a playoff feel under the spotlight, I just have a sense that, things have happened in Salt Lake City in July in the past in terms of tempers flaring and emotions getting involved and referees throwing people out. And, we will see. I'm excited for this matchup.
My question is, who takes over the bus driver mantle? Because Will Selfridge is not active in this game. Alex Atkins is also out with an injury. You know there's going to be a bus driver celebration from somebody or a peace sign. These two teams have callbacks to callbacks when it comes to taunting and celebrations over the years.
I think it's the two guys I mentioned, Adam. I think it's Toby Brooks and Tony Moonga. They're going to be, I wouldn't put it past Noah Coolman either.
Snog was throwing up deuces when he was streaking in the end zone last weekend.
Man,
and he's the guard dog. I don't know what it is with him always being yards away from the emphatic spike, but it is so cosmically hilarious that he is always right there when the Summit are doing some huge atomic windmill spike, and then he just goes off like a yard dog. Oh, what a good rivalry.
I got a piece of information that you probably aren't aware of, and I could have just saved it for the broadcast, but, this is an hour into the pod where I like to drop these little nuggets. Do you know that Matt Rusnagel tried out for the 2015 San Diego Growlers and got cut? So this is 10 years ago. He is in Southern California. He gives it a shot. They turn him away. He's just had a fascinating Frisbee journey. And now he's like the oldest guy on Salt Lake's team from an age standpoint by a lot, by multiple years. He might be the only guy in his 30s, and I think he's 32. And he got cut by the Growlers 10 years ago. He got cut by a club team in San Diego, when he was out there as well. And he found his form and his love for the game playing college Frisbee at the University of Tennessee, Chattanooga for the Swamp Donkeys, which is not a high-profile college ultimate program, with all due respect to the Swamp Donkeys. And what a statement to be making there. What a story. And he is a beloved captain and teammate. And what he's done this year is one of the great stories in the league. And the next chapter unfolds tomorrow night on Friday Night Frisbee, 9 p.m. Eastern, 7 o'clock Mountain. We'll see you on UFA YouTube.
Zooming out just a little bit, barely at all, you talk about there being a lot of yapping in this Salt Lake, Colorado matchup. There's going to be multiple rivalry games with that amount of chatter this weekend. Boston and DC last weekend, they weren't exactly friendly with each other out on that field. I expect similar energy in the nation's capital on Saturday night for the game of the week. You've got this Philly team, city brotherly love. They don't like to get after it at all. They're going to be in some contentious games with both Boston and New York. Central Division, we haven't even touched on Madison, Minnesota, a game that's going to be crucial for deciding the number 2 seed. I know Minnesota has held that advantage in that rivalry the past couple of years, particularly at Seafoam, but they don't like each other. This is going to be a pretty contentious Week 12 slate of games.
Yeah, and just to clarify, like I think it'll be contentious and spicy and extracurricular. I am not thinking, and I am hoping that it is not dirty. And like
Right.
Justin Burnett's bid on Don de Marray, there's no place for that. Cole Moore's bid on Thomas Edmonds, that was scratchy, shaky as well. Like we have seen some bad bids, and I think for the most part, players know immediately, and we're not seeing like intentionally dirty stuff. But like, look, games are physical, marks are physical. There's a lot of chatter, and like that is okay, and that adds to the intensity and urgency for everything. So for any players out there listening, like don't mistake contentiousness with recklessness. Absolutely. Because there's obviously a line that you don't want to cross, and you want to be safe, and you can play physically without playing dangerous. Like that has been proven over and over again, and I expect to see that in all these games. And just because someone has a bad bid doesn't make them a bad guy. Like most people acknowledge their mistake immediately. And yeah, I mean, that's just a thought that's been percolating in my mind. And in these games in the East and in the West and in the South and in the Central too, like across the whole league, there are meaningful games this weekend. And, you know, you want them to be fought hard. You want them to be fought fair. You know, I've been saying for a long time, all I've wanted for my 40th birthday is double overtime in Colorado Salt Lake. So I'm crossing my fingers that that's what we get tomorrow night.
Yeah, and it's a terrific point, and I'm glad you bring it up. Physicality has been on a rise this season, and it's really unfortunate to see. I wish there was a little bit more of trying to be delicate here, like an official's hand in sort of discouraging some of that play. I do feel like it's bubbled beyond what is normally acceptable. But to your point, I think when we talk about contentiousness, yapping, taunting, this sort of stuff, it's always with the very, very heavily implied line of, but not to the point of dangerous, not to the point of being hurtful in any sense, and I think that's where sports are so much fun, is establishing that line between playful kind of puckishness, like being a little bit exuberant in your celebrations versus, actually offending people, actually doing harm to something. And I think, again, that line is always a little murky, but what we want is good competitive battles that never boil over into something that's harmful to anyone, right?
Yeah. And look, a lot of that is on the refs too. And I know that there are referees that listen to the show. You got to be assertive. You got to be authoritative early in games. You got to set the line of what's acceptable and what's not. And look, the refs know this, and it's a really hard job to be a UFA referee. You have 4 on the field. There are 7 different individual matchups and 14 bodies that are strong and fast and physical flying around out there. And look, I think a certain level of physicality is acceptable and good. But, if officials see something, you call it on the mark, downfield in the stack. You make a call in the first quarter, it could, change things for the better for the entirety of the game. Don't wait till the second or third quarter to make a call if you saw something in the first quarter. So, yeah, I mean, every game matters more. A week from now, we're heading into the final weekend of the season. 2 weeks from now, we're heading into the playoffs, and championship weekend is just around the corner too. So it's a really fun time, and I can't remember a season, and we've thought this way from the beginning, but like going into the final 2 weeks of the season, there are still 14 teams that could be at championship weekend, and of those 14 teams, who could I not fathom at championship weekend? And I'm just going to be direct. I can't fathom the Madison Radicals at championship weekend, even though they'll be there in Madison. It's hard to fathom the Philadelphia Phoenix at championship weekend. San Diego Growlers, hard to fathom. But everybody else that's left, I could envision realistically at championship weekend. So that's 11 different teams for 4 spots. And maybe one of those 3 teams I mentioned will prove me wrong and maybe eat those words in an awesome social media clip a month from now. I'm here for it. So bring it
That's
on.
all this show is for, really, is to just wait until the future and then cherry pick something Evan and I were wrong about and then farm it for social media clout.
Frankly, I'm surprised that doesn't happen more because I'm wrong about a lot.
We're wrong all the time. No.
Try to be nuanced with my takes and just, try to speak my mind and tell you how I feel. And yeah, right now, it's going to be a fun weekend. I fly to Salt Lake City tonight and looking forward to it's going to be hot. Not as hot. Like yesterday, it was literally 105 degrees in Salt Lake City. It's cooling off to like 95 for tomorrow. Maybe it'll cool off into the 80s for the game, but I know it's been hot everywhere. Except I was texting with former Aviators coach Jeff Landisman for a random reason, and he sent me a screenshot where it was like 68 degrees in Southern California where he was, and I was just like, God damn it, why don't we all live in Southern California? Because 65 degrees.
Wildfires, remember?
Yeah, you're not wrong, but there's pros and cons to everywhere. But yeah, it's been a good time to get a good sweat outside, because you're out there for just a few minutes and you are drenched pretty quick. So, and I'm not even an athlete like most of these players are, despite my strong pickleball results this week in my local games. So,
all right, pickleball mentioned. We're putting the cap on it. We're heading into the penultimate weekend of the regular season. Week 12 is coming up shortly in the UFA. Again, 8 of the 12 playoff spots have been clinched. 4 still to be claimed. Only Chicago has clinched a 1 seed, so the other 11 playoff spots and seeding still yet to be determined in these final 2 weekends. Tomorrow night, Evan will be in Salt Lake for the Colorado versus Salt Lake Friday night Frisbee feature at 9 p.m. Eastern on UFA YouTube. And there will be a slew of other games that you're going to want to tune into, as we talked about all episode long. You can check in with all of those live on Watch UFA TV. But that will do it for us here and now on Swing Pass. We will be with you very shortly. But we're saying bye for now. Frisbee forever. See you soon.